Hi everyone, welcome to Papa's Workshop. I bet you are sanding your projects wrong. What do you bet? Okay, here's the deal. There's a lot of different sanders out there and they have good purposes, but people use them incorrectly. Today I want to be able to show you a variety of different sanders and how to use them and to be able to get the best results on your project. In addition, we're going to be talking about dust collection. Those sanders throw off tons of dust and you don't want to breathe that in. So today we're going to discuss all of this, and this is going to be a video for the beginner series, but I'll bet the old pros can learn a few things too. Now this is a variety of the different sanders that I have, and on this side I have the belt sanders. Now this sander is designed to be able to rapidly remove a lot of material, because it's basically designed to be an aggressive sander. Now on this side I have the Orbital sanders, and I have this one right here is a Mouse Detail Sander. Very nice to have. And I can't forget these hand sanders as well. The one in the center in the back is a fine finishing sander. To start off this discussion, I want to talk about the belt sanders. Now the belt sanders are a very aggressive sander, and they have a belt that will turn, and it will take a lot of material off very quickly. You also have a port back here to be able to capture some of the sawdust. Now on some of these, and I have taken this one off, but on some of the belt sanders, they have a bag attached. They really don't do a lot as far as capturing the sawdust. They get a little bit, but not a lot. You also have a lot of sawdust that goes every other place. But this is the belt sander. So think of the belt sander as an aggressive sander for being able to quickly remove a lot of material. The next type of sander that you're going to have is the orbital sander. And this actually sands in kind of a rotation direction. And as a result of this, you can get swirls on the wood, and that really does not stain real well. This too has a port right here to be able to extract the sawdust, and it has a bag. I have this one right here. This is the Topshak, and I've been using this one quite a bit. And this is called a Mouse Detail Sander because it has this point. It's really great for getting into those little bitty small areas that you cannot get with any other sander. Now this sander is a very old sander. It's by Craftsman, and it's been around for a long time. But this actually was called a finishing sander. You had a lever right here on the side for being an orbital, and it would do that rotation motion, or you could flip the lever and it would be just back and forth. And that actually was a good finish sanding. Now this is another little small detail sander, and this is a belt sander, but it is very effective to be able to get into small places where you need to remove a lot of material quickly. And I can't leave out just a little round or the little square blocks that hold the sandpaper, because this is good for hand sanding, of course. Get rid of the mechanicals altogether. The other important thing is you can use a block of wood, a dowel rod, a pencil, anything to be able to get to the contour of the shape that you're trying to sand. I also want to include the desktop models because there's a wide variety of these type of sanders as well. Now this is an oscillating sander that is fantastic for being able to do a lot of the detail work and be able to remove and sand the edges quite quickly. Another sander that gets an awful lot of use in the shop, of course this disc sander down here probably gets the most work, but I use the belt sander up top quite a bit as well. I want to get this little sander out where you can see it, and this is also a belt sander, but it's a 1-inch wide by a 30-inch long belt. And this works very well for a lot of detail projects. No discussion is complete about the sanders without talking about the sandpaper. Sandpaper comes in different grit, and grit actually means how coarse that paper is, and that equates to how fast it can actually sand down the material. Let's go over to my cabinet and let me show you the sandpaper that I have. In the cabinet, I have everything organized by the grit size. And I start out with a 60 grit, 100, 120, and it goes right all the way up to the 320 grit paper. Over on this side, I do have a paper that are 6-inch in diameter, and this goes on that desktop model. Now these again are graded by the different grit size to be able to keep everything organized. Over on this section, I have all the flat or the sheet paper. Now I use this for those little hand sanders and for that detail finishing sander. And that grit goes all the way up to 2000, which is very, very fine. So I turn the page again to my cabinet, and this is where all the belt sanders are. That's the 1x30, the belt sanders for all the different machines, including that little small one. You noticed in the cabinet, on each of those packages, they have a different number, and that indicated the grit. Also, on the back of the sandpaper, if you look at this sandpaper is fairly rough, but on the back of it, it actually tells you that this is the 80 grit. So for an example, this one is 120 grit, and it's going to be a little bit smoother than the one that was at 80 grit. I also have the 120, which it says right there. And I also have 180. And you can see that the 180 grit is much smoother. The other thing that I want to point out to you, there's really two different types of sandpaper to be able to attach to your sanders. Some of them have this little fuzzy back on them, and it's a hook and loop, because on the sander itself, it has the loops. Basically, it's like Velcro, and when you take this part and stick it onto the sander, you're done, you're ready to sand. Now this type, for an example, says stick and sand. Now this is 120 grit, but this is not the hook and loop. On the back side, where it says all the information, this has this shiny surface on it. That's actually a film that you peel off, and that exposes the glue, and then you will stick that onto the sander. The most common sanders that you're going to find out there are the belt sanders and those orbital sanders. What I want to be able to concentrate on today is showing you that detail sander, that little mouse detail sander that gets up into the corners. If I had to choose all of the sanders, that would be the one sander that I would choose to have in my tool chest, because that can do so much of the flat open areas as the orbital sanders can do, but it can also get into those small inside corners and the details that you just can't get with any other sander. The next topic that I want to discuss is how you're going to capture the dust. The bags that you have on these different sanders, really not that effective. To me, what you need is a hose and a vacuum system to be able to capture the sawdust. Now, one of the things that I have done is I purchased this hose and kit, and this has the different adapters on the end of various sizes to be able to fit most of the tools that I have. Now, this is not a sponsored video for this hose system. I just want to be able to talk about one of the ways that you can actually capture the sawdust. Now, if you don't want to do a system like this, you can also make your own adapters and just use your shop vacuum cleaner hose. Now, this is one of the examples that I wanted to show you that I just made, and I could cut this out on the bandsaw, or I could cut this out on the CNC machine to be able to use it as an adapter to be able to fit onto the different tools. So you don't have to spend a lot of money buying something special. You can make it in the shop. And for an example, here's another one that I made out of the particle board that serves the same purpose. It just fits a different tool. Now on this Topshak, this is that Mouse Detail Sander. It has this type of a container to be able to capture the sawdust. And you can see there's still sawdust everywhere that it does not capture. Now inside of this, you have a little filter. I'm sorry, you would be cleaning out this filter all the time. So that's something I really don't think is needed. What I do like about having the bags or a container like this is the sawdust that you can save. That is the very fine sawdust that you can actually mix with the glue and create a really nice wood filler. Now once I remove the dust collector, I'm going to set that aside, and you're left with this round opening. what you want to be able to do, if you're using the store-bought type, just find the adapter that fits, and then you can slide that on, just like that. From here, the hose will screw into this. And this will increase the efficiency of your dust collection, tenfold. So this is what I would suggest using anytime that you're using the sanders, is attach the hose to it. Now, I will have to say this. There are some sanders out there that do not have that round end on it. This is one, for an example, that was by Harbor Freight, and this does not have a round end where the dust is coming out. You're almost forced to use this little bag to be able to collect the sawdust, and that's something I really do not like. I want to be able to have the sanders that have the round port where I can attach a hose very easily. And that's one of the things that I really like about the Topshak. Now this one by Jealous also has the round port on it. Again, it's easy to be able to attach the hose to be able to capture the sawdust. So from that standpoint, I would stay away from this one, and I would look at this type of variety where you can attach the hose easily to it and be able to capture the majority of the sawdust. Now the same is true when it comes to the belt sanders. This belt sander by Jealous also has the round port, and I can again easily add the hose to it, and I'm ready to be able to sand. And it's going to capture a lot more of the sawdust with this hose and the vacuum on it than if you did not. The Mouse Detail Sander by Topshak, all cleaned up, looks pretty amazing. Now when you purchase a tool such as this, you'll get a variety of the different grits paper, and of course you're going to get the manual and the warranty cards with it. And this is going to be true with really any sander that you're going to purchase. But this one has proven to be an exceptional value to be able to have in the shop. As I mentioned a moment ago, if I could only have one sander in the shop, this would be it. The Mouse Detail Sander is very good at being able to, of course, sand these flat areas. Now when you're building a cabinet such as this, you can have just a little bit of imperfections or a difference in height between the different materials. And be able to sand that, you can start off with the 80 grit, and then as it gets smoother and smoother, you need to be able to go ahead and switch to that finer grit paper. And to change it with that hook and loop system, it just peels off one, choose the correct grit, and put it right back onto the sander, and you're back working. Now this will smooth out these joints very quickly and effectively. But the real advantage of having this sander is being able to get into those inside corners where the other sanders just can't get to. Now as far as the edges, again, this is a much easier tool to be able to use to be able to sand it. And again, I'm just going to switch to the grit of 180 to be able to finish sanding the face of this cabinet face frame. And this will be ready to be able to paint. Now I'm not trying to stain this one, so I don't need to go to any higher grit. When you're sanding, of course, always use a dust mask. That will help to keep that dust out of your lungs, and that's very important. The biggest advantage of a Mouse Detail Sander is being able to get into these small interior corners. This is so much nicer than trying to use an Orbital sander, or even that belt sander would be absolutely impossible. Don't even try it. So this is a very effective tool to get to these inside corners. And no need to change sanders when it's time to be able to sand to the open areas. A lot of people are very shy and timid, and in fact some cases actually afraid of using a belt sander. And a belt sander does not have to be intimidating. What you have to be able to do is understand how it works and how to be able to use it safely. And the first thing you want to do when you're shopping for one, you want to get one as large as you can afford. Some of these belts are 4 inches wide by about 24 inches long. This one, for an example, is a 3-inch wide and it's 21 inches long. So you want to be able to consider that when you're purchasing one. You also want to consider one that has a variable speed, and this one does right here. I can control the speed of the belt, and that really helps in being able to control the sanding. When you start the sanding process, you want to make sure that you start about halfway over your project to be able to set it down flat and have it moving above the surface when you set it down. Another good important factor is the cord and the hose. Probably the simplest thing to be able to do is take the cord, take the hose, and literally throw it over your shoulder, just like this. And that way, it's not going to be in the way of the sanding operation. So, to be able to use this, you would start the sander, you would turn it on, be able to hold it over in this area, and then set it down on the material and sand down all the way to the end and lift off. If you're sanding and you come down and just stop right here in the sanding motion and then come back forward, guess what? When you stop right here, you're going to be digging into that wood, and that is going to be a sunken in, dug out spot. You don't want to do that. So you want to be able to, again, start here, set it down, move all the way down, and then lift up just like an airplane would be taken off. Then you can come back and do the same thing, overlap it about halfway. You want to be able to keep it overlapping. One of the best ways to be able to keep and know if you're sanding evenly is to take a pencil and mark the wood. That way, with those pencil lines on there, as you're sanding, you'll be sanding away that pencil line and you'll know that you're sanding evenly. And when you're sanding, you always start the sander first and then put it down on the wood to begin the sanding operation. Now, if you're doing a small piece like this board is going to have a tendency to just take off in that direction and you won't have anything to sand other than a workbench. So it's a good idea to be able to clamp down a piece of wood just to be able to help support it. Now, if you clamp down a piece of wood like this, because this is a fairly small project, make sure that the material that you're using is the same thickness or even slightly smaller so that you're not going to be hitting that and not being able to go the full distance with your sander. Always go with the grain. This little sander, the Mouse Detail Sander, you can come back and finish this, and again, go with the grain of the wood to be able to do your sanding, and remember to sand the entire surface of the project. So often people concentrate just on the joints or just on the edges. You need to be concerned about the entire surface. That will make a difference, especially if you're staining the project. I would avoid using the belt sander for the plywood. And the reason being, if you look at this, you have a very, very small surface. And it'd be very easy to be able to sand right through that surface. And you don't want to do that. Even with marking it with a pencil and taking all the precautions, because this laminate is so thin, it would be very easy to be able to sand through it. So don't use the belt sander on the plywood. What about sanding the edges? You want to be able to take the sander and be able to go over the entire distance. Be very careful with the corners, because this corner is going to be very easy to be able to over sand, and you're going to have a very flat corner. So you're better off just going ahead and sanding a nice round over with your sander. Do the same thing on this side, and then if you still need to have this point rounded off just a little bit, just take your hand sander and round that edge off. Much, much easier to do it that way. Thank you for watching the video today, and I hope you was able to learn a few of the tips and tricks to be able to make sanding your project a little bit easier. I hope that you will take the time with each of your projects and take sanding equally as important as any other step in the project, because it really does make a difference when you have a project properly sanded before you put that final finish on. So if you liked the video today, please go ahead and give me a thumbs up, and while you're there, hit that little subscribe button down there and the bell notification next to it so that you will be notified on the next videos that I upload. I look forward to seeing each and every one of you in the next video that I publish, whatever that may be. Thank you very much for watching today. Bye-bye.